everybody. Today is International Women's Day. So what better panel to do than this faith, female, and the global stage? We have an amazing panel, and I'm so excited for you to hear their stories. But before we do that, I have a question for you all. So when God, in the beginning, when God created the earth, everything he created, he said, God saw that it was good. Do you remember the one time he said, and it was not good? Man was alone, that's right. And so God created females, and the word in Hebrew is azer, and it's often translated helper, suitable for Adam, but that word does not capture the robust meaning of azer. Azer also means to rescue, to save, and it also has a military connotation where God is often described as an azer, coming to the aid of Israel and his people. So that is what azer means. That is what we as females were created to be, this strong helper, suitable for a man. And so I have some amazing azers on this panel. And instead of my introducing them, some of them have already been on many panels already, so you may already know kind of their story, but I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves by way of this question. The question is, tell me a little bit about your leadership journey. And we're going to be very high level, so 2 minutes. Tell me a little bit about your leadership journey. And if you want to highlight in the midst of this question, if you had any female role models that helped you along the way. And maybe we'll start with you, Karen.
Okay. Thank you, Joyce. Is this on? Yes. Thank you, Joyce. That was a great introduction. I like to think of a lot of these biblical women as kind of the badasses of their day. I'm Karen Quintos, married 38 years to my husband, Tony, who's here in the audience. We spoke about marriage and faith just a couple of hours ago. I was raised in Pennsylvania. I went to Penn State from a big Penn State family, worked at Merck for about 12 years in supply chain marketing, operations, ran one of their manufacturing plants for a period of time. I then went to Citibank. I followed Tony, who at that time had a much better job than I did. I was at Citibank, did a lot of work on their kind of global customer transformation. Got a telephone call one day from an executive recruiter from Dell, who I said, wow, great company, not moving my family to Texas. The recruiter said, Austin is not Texas. And we've been here for 25 years. So I spent 21 years at Dell in varying roles in supply chain, customer, and technical support, many areas of marketing, which ultimately led to me reporting directly to Michael as the Chief Marketing Officer for about 6 years, and then 2 years as their first ever Chief Customer Officer. So I stepped away about 3 years ago and doing a lot of work on public boards, nonprofit boards, and just being with family and great events like this.
Hi, Joyce. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. You guys are here just a couple of blocks from my old hood where I grew up back in the day when you couldn't walk your dog at night. So I am from a border town of El Paso. I am the CEO of a company I founded 14 years ago, Avant-Garde, Washington, D.C. based. I have a Texas team. Most of the team is in the D.C. area, and about 130 consultants now. And you know, and Joyce, you know this, we've talked and been able to sidebar. You know, I just grew up as a border town gal. When I was born in El Paso, and my mom moved me to Austin, and you're looking at a woman who was a high school dropout, ex-drug addict, single mom in poverty on welfare, that God rescued from the gutter and put me on a path of leadership. I was not always a leader. And I very quickly accelerated my journey when I gave my heart to the Lord. I landed a job in a welfare to work initiative working for a woman by the name of Ann Richards in Texas. And that was in 1989. And then went on to work for another woman, powerhouse woman named Kay Bailey Hutchison, who went on to be senator. And my last iconic boss was George W. And so I always tell in my book, Lost Girl, that I depict in great detail, you know, people like me don't end up in jobs like that, but for a miracle intervention and people that invested in me, that believed in me and saw something in me I didn't see in myself. And had the pleasure of serving under the Bushes for 12 years, and both in Texas and in DC, and just really love living my best life here in Austin. My husband and I are going on 35 years, so you have us beat, Karen. Great. I'm a nana, I'm a mama, and most importantly, I'm a lover of Jesus, because he is the one that can really take a broken life and transform it to really do great things. And I'm honored to be here, Joyce.
Beautiful. Thank you. Terry.
Well, good afternoon. I am so honored to be here among these inspiring, faithful women in God. My name is Terry Mitchell. I am an Austin native, born and raised, old East Austin as well, Rebecca. And when we talk about my leadership journey, I would say I was born into it. I'm the first daughter of three, and I have two younger sisters. I was also born into a family where my mother was a single mother. So I, all my life, knew the power and the magic of women. I'm very much a girl's girl. Since then, you know, so I've always led everything, led the school projects, you know, those team projects. I was always the leader in that, and, you know, led the fundraising efforts for schools and all that, and then very quickly moved into entrepreneurship, where my husband and I started a software development firm. It's an enterprise SaaS company, and we are the largest Black-owned company in Texas, largest Black-owned software company in Texas. Thank you. So we've been doing that for 11 years. That's my big business. I used to do hair in college to get me through, and now I have a salon in Pflugerville called Glam Beauty Bar. It houses 10 of the most amazing beauty experts in the city. And there I really get to pour into women, young women, on their journey toward entrepreneurship. I treat the salon much like a university, and I tell them by 4 years, you should be ready to either start your own salon or spa or move into some new venture, but you're moving up in 4 years, and I help them by way of trainings and mentorship to do that. I'm also the co-owner of Austin Woman Magazine, where we have a cover woman on the stage from 2017, just made aware of that. And so really honored to do that work, and really all over Central Texas, bring women together, unite a community of women in business, women on the career trajectory, to have a hub, a space, because it's very isolating in that business sphere. But yeah, I truly believe in the power of women. Everything that I do is for women. Everything that I know is the power of women. And someone in the back, he was actually like helping to facilitate, but he's a professor at Columbia International, and told me about a book called Here Comes the Girls, and we should all check that out. So I'm saying it here because I'm going to check it out too, but you know, the backstory on the research shows that in a few years, maybe a decade or so, women are set to run the world, right? And that we are the fastest growing demographic in business. And so hunker up, it's happening, right? There's really data to show that we are the next big thing. Yeah.
I want to say thank you to the 8 men that are here who are cheering us on. I am always like so amazed at the male allies who are not embarrassed at all. I am so honored to be here, and even though I'm like on my 4th cup of coffee, so I'm acting jittery. But that's part of being a woman too these days. My name is Ilaria. I'm originally from Hong Kong. I currently live in San Francisco Bay Area with my husband and a 2-year-old. I started my career with Goldman Sachs, stayed there till I made vice president. I was in charge of taking Asian companies public in the U.S. and during an era when U.S. and China still liked each other. And I was definitely an era of globalization, baby, and I felt very welcomed as a Chinese woman working on Wall Street in my 20s. But I kind of had an existential crisis halfway through, and I took a break from Wall Street. I went to culinary school, became a food judge for World's 50 Best Restaurant by fluke, went on the road with a few nonprofits, which later on, many years later, invited me to join their boards. And after that, had a second career joining a tech company called Grab out in Singapore, which is kind of like the Uber, DoorDash, PayPal all in one, and they operate in 8 countries. And I actually joined the company because I started initially a Bible study with the CEO founder, and then later on, he gave me a shot and let me enter a whole new different sector. We went public in 2021 on NASDAQ, and NASDAQ brought the bell to Singapore for the first time to ring the bell there as we went public. And we co-founded a think tank at that time, and I'm the founding chairman still of the think tank called Tech for Good Institute in 2021. And what we do is basically help the 8 countries in Southeast Asia that we operate in think about how to harness tech for the good of society, for everyday people, and engage the public and private sector together. So I still am in that role. I sit on various boards ranging from geopolitics to education, venture capital, to women empowerment, and also humanitarian work for orphans in developing Asia. And my most important job of all is to be a mom to a 2-year-old who does not want to let me sleep. And, at the age 43, it is not that easy, but I think that is my most important job right now.
I love how all of your past, you probably didn't think when you started out that you would end up where you are, and maybe it's taken some twists and turns. Maybe it was people along the way who saw something in you that you didn't know about yourself. And I bet there's some defining moments. And so I'm going to direct this question to you, Rebecca. If there's a defining moment in your path that kind of tested or strengthened your faith, and if you could tell us about that. And if other people want to chime in, feel free.
Yeah, well, first of all, when I saw you sent that question, I thought, gosh, I could tell a million stories. About 20 stories are in my book, and some of them in the Oval Office. I'll tell my first time in the Oval Office moment. Well, first of all, the leadership journey that I've had is because women invested in me, and men invested in me. When I didn't invest in myself and didn't believe in myself. Because of my background, I walked in a lot of shame. And I tell a story in chapter 3 where I almost didn't make Secret Service clearance. I barely scathed by because of my shady past, but I made it. I think about the women and the men that believed and really championed my future. Obviously, a lot of work on myself through trauma healing and through the word and through mentors and counseling. But without these people in my life, I would be dead in prison or barefoot pregnant with 1 million kids. That was my destiny. If somebody had told me when I was 17, a high school dropout, living in poverty as a single mom with abject hopelessness, my mom was a heroin addict and abandoned me when I was 5. Rebecca, one day you're going to be the advisor to the leader of the free world. Rebecca, one day you're going to be a mom and a grandmother. One day you're going to be part of the fastest growing demographic, a Latina-owned business in Texas. One day you're going to be investing in the next generation of inner city girls through our scholarship program. I probably would have used a few choice words, but I think the defining moment, so many defining moments for me, the one defining moment for me when I joined that Welfare to Work program, I had a woman in government who looked at me when I was her receptionist and said, Rebecca, did you know you have potential? Did you know you could be something? Did you know you could be a leader? Would you like to go to management training? Would you like to go to the LBJ School of Public Affairs to get some education? I had never had anybody, Joyce, believe in me, ever. And I'm not exaggerating that. In my community, I grew up in Barrio El Paso in East Austin. My mother wasn't married, my grandmother wasn't married. It was a very heavy, Hispanic, male-dominated, oppressing culture. Thank God we don't have that today. My girls have great fathers but I didn't have that. When I dropped out of school, there was no alternative for me because I was pregnant. And so I think about those defining moments and how they were transformative in my journey. And I will never, ever forget then my number one job is to go back and pay it forward to the next generation. Because who knows, as you walk in your communities, in your workplace, that you will have little Rebeccas in your life, that you don't know what that word of positive affirmation, encouragement, did you know you can be something? Did you know you have potential? You never know the influence and the impact you're going to make in that one person that you speak life into. So those are really powerful moments for me.
That's so good. I think that that's a common thread that I see in all of you, that you are trying to lift up those women and younger generation coming behind you. I heard you, Terry, talk about like the vision of this beauty salon is not just to, provide those services for people coming in through the doors, but it's really to train up and form, like inner formation of these women. And so just to throw this question to anyone who wants to answer, as you are a role model in your fields, how do you see it making an impact and how have you been doing this to like help others along the path?
Well, honestly, Joyce, I kind of wanted to go back to the question that Rebecca had
go
mentioned,
ahead,
'cause
whatever question you want to
one,
answer.
it was a phenomenal answer, and you have such a powerful story. And two, I do believe and know that anyone, man or woman, but certainly in the context of what we're talking about, females, when we're setting out to do anything inspirational, motivational, something that will help the next generation, it is very hard work and you will always be tested. I do believe that no good deed goes without consequence to some degree, and we see that in scriptures with Jesus and how he was on the cross for merely wanting to show us the way, right? And so this is nothing new, but I wanted to mention something that happened to me very recently over the last maybe 2 years. I'd started a fund for Black-led nonprofits, and we'd given out about $1 million in about a year and a half to Black-led nonprofits here in Austin. And you would think this is like some dreamy fairy tale story or how it ends, and that's not the case. In fact, I was maligned on social media, for all kinds of things. A lot of it was around some of the folks that didn't get the dollar, or that applied or didn't apply and felt entitled to it. Feeling some type of way. Some people that have grown up with me in my community right here in East Austin don't understand how I've gotten to this position, and maybe we know you. I know you. Well, how is it that you've been able to do this? There's no way you've been able to do this on the right path. You've had to take in some shortcuts, right? And so it was a viral sensation for months on months. I was maligned. People showed up at my house. My home was posted. My address was posted. It was a very scary time for me. And many of us would have retreated under those circumstances. You would just retreat. You would want to just hide in your corner and never show back up. But it was really God he talked to me and told me that I was supposed to be doing this, and that, anytime that you're doing something that is new or unusual, it will feel scary to, anyone around. And so it has strengthened my faith with God. It has also made me realize that this is the standard for whenever you're doing something innovative, new. It's going to cause and kick up some concern with everyone around you, and you have to know that that vision was given to you. It wasn't given to anybody else, and you have to move that vision forward regardless to what anyone has to say. So I think about, I leaned in a lot around the stories of Jesus, the stories of Esther, right? Like how the story of Esther, the young queen that you couldn't even, was saving the Jews, right, from extermination, but was putting herself at risk, even with her own husband, by going and moving that work forward. I think about women all throughout the Bible that, the Mary who touched the hem of Jesus, that she could have been ostracized for something like that, knowing who she was or what her backstory was, I'm saying this to the women in the room. move forward boldly, with what God gives you in your spirit. That is your work to do. And know that it is going to come with criticism. It is going to come with kickback. And none of that matters because you are here to do God's work. So I just wanted to put that into the space.
Yeah, thank you for that word. Sometimes we think if we're following God's call that it'll be easy.
Oh, yeah.
But that's not the case. And if you, like, as you said and mentioned about characters in the Bible, they were following God's call, but they faced persecution. They were mocked, and some of the prophets were told they were going to fail, but they were faithful, and I see that in you all. I would like to ask this next question. I'll start with Karen. In what ways do you integrate your faith in your daily leadership practices, in your decision making, in creating a culture at your workplace? What is the role of faith in that?
I did it a number of ways, and these women touched on a lot of really great examples around how to pay it forward, how to lean on purpose. I've always had this fundamental belief that the gifts that God gives you, and those gifts are given to both men and women, but there are clearly some unique gifts that God has given to women. But those gifts that we are all given around honesty, humility, authenticity, purpose-driven, servant leadership, are gifts that you can absolutely bring to life in the business world. When I was Chief Marketing Officer at Dell, it was really important to me to get every employee, all 100,000 of them, to understand the connection between their job and the mission of the company and the great things that we could go do. We made it a practice and a mission to ensure that every one of them knew how to give back, how to serve in their local community, how to volunteer their time. We made it our mission with a lot of help from others around how do you change the culture of a big company? And at that time, when I joined Dell, people would say to me, this place is a sweatshop. They grind out people. And, through the years that I was there, and with a lot of help from, peers and colleagues, we really kind of changed the culture to be much more about leadership, authenticity, purpose-driven, and really, people don't wake up in the morning and look at the price of the Dell stock and that's their single level of motivation. Mm-hmm. They want to be part of something bigger. They want to know that the job that they're doing is going to have a bigger impact than themselves. And your job as leaders in the organization is to unlock the full potential of those human beings and give them a reason to show up at work every single day. And I think my faith and the gifts that God has given me allowed me to do that.
That's awesome. And I think as a leader, you also embody those things of honesty and integrity to your employees. So you're trying to create the culture for them, but you're also modeling that at the same time, so they can know what they're striving towards as well. Ilaria, do you want to add to that question and how you would answer that?
Yeah, so I really like this verse when Paul says, be all things to all people. I know the context is different in Corinthians, but it really helps me in my journey because I am both gentle, submissive at home at times, but I'm also badass at work. And I feel like as a younger person, especially on Wall Street, and as an Asian woman in a, very white world at that time, I felt I had to be a certain way, and I had to just kind of behave myself, We were talking in the green room, are you too bossy? Are you too bitchy? Like there's like this kind of narrative, but we don't, why? Like, why do we have to be labeled that way? I think it's just such a beautiful thing to be able to be all of those things unapologetically and don't feel like you have to prove yourself. And there is a strength about it. I think God also has a creation order. God gifted us with a certain role to be a mother, to be nurturing, but God also give us so many opportunities to lead in the gracious, empathetic way. Adam Grant recently said that if more world leaders, especially politicians, were women, there was 35 to 40% higher chance of peace. And it's not degrading men, but there is something about women's desire to make friends, make peace, listen to how people are feeling, make everyone feel valued and heard. And recently, there are some very, very senior men world leaders that reach out to me to ask for introductions because they want to leave their government position or their firms. And the first thing they tell me is, I do not feel valued or seen at my firm. And I'll switch a gear a little bit. I was talking to one of the committee members of YPO, Young President Organization, who's a woman, and her mission is to include more women into YPO. But you have to either be a chairman, president, or CEO in order to qualify into YPO, into this network. And they're like, how do you do it? How do you get more women to be in that position to be able to lead like these wonderful ladies up here? Because women do want to take time off when you have children. God gave us that beautiful task of having children, but we also want to be there to make sure they grow up with love. Is there a way to make sure that women aren't completely left out, hence cannot be let back into the game after they went to the workforce? There's so many crazy smart women because they're out for 12 years, they can't get back in, and their talent has to be truncated. That is one problem that does not have an answer yet, but in this modern time, we're gifted with that. And I just want to bring back to this, to be all things to all people, is that like I feel like right now we can actually enjoy and all these roles that God has given to us as women, and also identify the shortcomings that and the gap that is still there, and how can we solve that here on earth, because we all want to be productive and do the most with the talents that we've been given, but there are some structural issues, and we can do that together.
Joyce, I want to just add one thing to the sort of component of your question around faith in women and being in the positions we are of leadership. You know, I lead, my sort of philosophy is lead in humility and like Jesus did. And I think a lot of women are labeled, we were talking about this again in the room, because they might lead with more power and strength and protest. I really believe that the power that we have it could be very powerful in presence. But I had an experience when I first went to the White House. I was the only commissioned officer on the president's team from the Texas with him. And I came into an environment where I was not welcomed. Didn't have the education. I knew Bush and he knew me, and he trusted me with personnel because that's what I did for him. But I didn't have the credentials, didn't have the education, and I was from Texas. And more so, I wasn't at the caliber. I didn't work for Dick Armey or Senator Lott or all these big wigs on the Hill. I didn't know anything about anything. And there was a woman in my office. I was a higher rank than she was. I don't like rank. I think it stinks. If God gives it to you, awesome. But don't wear it on your shoulder and, you know, I'm the CEO, I'm the commission, whatever. So this woman comes up to me and she just reamed me about something I didn't do right. She had worked for Reagan. She had worked for Papa Bush, as we called him. And she reamed me, and I stood there and I took it. My deputy turned to me, and she couldn't believe that I didn't outrank her, because that's what you do in the White House, right? And I went back to my office and I wept. You know why I wept? I found out later that woman lost her husband. She didn't know Jesus. And I wept for her soul. I wept for her spirit. When I left the White House, that woman was at my going away party hugging me and saying she loved me because I won her over with love. And so I really challenge us to lead with love and with humility. And really, when people do show up and they're ugly, let's love them.
That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that story.
Can I add one other thing to what Ilaria said? I couldn't agree with you more. That this could be a little controversial, but the Ukraine-Russia war would have never happened if two women were running those countries. Hamas would have never happened, and the invasion on October 7th if two women were running those countries.
Tell me why. Flesh that out.
It's exactly what they're all saying, because women lead with this skill around collaboration, caring, thinking about how we can do good for so many other people. It's not about them, it's not about their ego, it's not about power, it's about doing good. And it's about leaving a legacy and an impact. We wouldn't be in all of these tariff wars right now if you had two women that were running. We just simply figure out how to get together. And that's not an indictment on who's in what elected position. It's more around what you were talking about is how do you lead with love? How do you demonstrate what God and Jesus has been telling us that this is how we ought to be doing? And I hope for the sake of the two daughters that we have, that there will be so many more women in powerful, influential kind of positions that are leading with a Christian mindset and a spiritual mindset, because the world will be a much better place.
Yeah, well said, well said. I think that also as women, we know how, and this isn't always the case, but I think we know how to share power, that collaboration piece. We know how to empower other people. And I think that we're not using our power for just ourselves. And I think that is the model of Jesus and how he laid down his power for us and to lift others up. And so I think just following that model.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention, you know, no matter what you're doing, what your purpose in life, what your gifts, your talents, your skills are, it is all to be funneled to use to serve. That is what Jesus did. He is the model of that. We are supposed to be servant leaders, right? And so when you're talking about leading in whatever capacity, it is to serve others, not ourselves. And I think the best leaders, man or female, male or female, are those servant leaders that lead from that. And I also just wanted to throw out, since this is about faith in females, my favorite chapter of the Bible is Proverbs 31. And it talks, to your point, about the multifaceted woman, right? Mm-hmm. She is running business, right, in the marketplace. She is making, running her home and those that work in her home, right? She is elevating her husband, right? But still making sure food is on the table. And so there's this, the multifaceted hat of a woman is spoken of in that beautiful chapter of Proverbs 31. I love it so much, and I'm reminded of that. Anytime that I get overwhelmed, I'm reminded of, I go back to that scripture to remind myself that not only are we supposed to wear many hats, but we were made for that. Yeah. We were made for that.
And she is a woman of noble character, and I think it stems from, she's caring for all these people, but it comes from the character within her that she's able to do that. I'm glad you brought that up, because when I read Proverbs 31, I get tired because I'm like, am I expected to do all these things? And I can't live up to all of those things, but I don't know that she's doing all of those things at the same time. This brings me to the next question, which is burnout, because I think all of you might be mothers, I'm not sure, but grandmother, mother, you're juggling things at a really high level. I want to ask you just kind of practically, what are some things that you have done to stay grounded? Maybe there's some spiritual practices that have helped you. Maybe there's some relationships that have helped you against burnout, but also to stay grounded in your identity as a woman of God, to be able, when you're tested, to stay strong. What are some of those practical things?
Well, I can tell you, for me, I live and breathe my prayer and meditation every morning. And I've recently started literally grounding myself. Mm-hmm. Y'all know what grounding is, right? Where you walk on barefoot. I have a coach that has incorporated that into my scheme. And yeah, I'll just tell you, I between running the DC practice, I leave on Monday for DC, running the nonprofit, I have the book leadership thought practice of keynote speaking, and grandma, mom of 35, or wife of 35 years, 2 kids. Sometimes I'm like, oh, Lordy. The kids call me Wonder Woman. They're like, Mom's Wonder Woman. Well, no, Mom does crash and burn. Mm-hmm. And I just have to know myself, Joyce. I feel like God calls us to have discernment around what we can do in our capacity. But there is a supernatural component to tapping into the supernatural capacity of God's favor and God's strength. And I liken it to literally so many stories in the Bible that where women tapped into their supernatural capacity and were able to do big global things for humans, for people. But my sort of level is my husband, and I told this story in the first panel. When I was in the White House, I used to have the honorable title. As soon as I got in the car, he would say, I want you to take your honorable hat off. You're my wife now. And you got to have people that will keep you grounded and will tell you that your little something stinks too. I have a tribe. I have my husband, who is a Latino, very strong Mexican Latino lion in his personality. And we're both lions, and so we complement each other very well. But you have to have people that will tell you that you're not all that.
Yeah.
Right? And you need to, like, my kids remind me all the time, Mom,
Yeah.
we don't really care. Can you come home because I need you to take the grandkids? And my kids always say, Nana needs to drop everything and take the grandkids. So have people in your life that will tell you your stuff and that won't kiss the ring, because there's a lot of people that want to kiss the ring, and it's really not healthy for us. We need humility. We need Jesus. We need family and friends that will ground us in humility.
Yeah, that's so true. Having real people around you that will tell you about yourself and keep you grounded is important. I also, to your point, Rebecca, believe that how you start your day is what will make of it, right? And so starting the day for me in meditation from the moment that I would open my eyes, like just really just praying, even silently. I have two kids. One's a toddler, one's an infant. So they're in the bed with us a lot of the nights. And so, getting creative on like how to, talk to God. And so for me, it's like, okay, before I get out of the bed and someone starts to roll over and wakes up, let me spend my time with God, talking to him first, meditating. I used to be able to like go and get my Bible. Now I have to use my Bible app, right, with the light on low. But getting creative about that. I'd also say time management. Time and time again in the Bible, it talks about time management. I do believe that if you organize yourself well, you can do all of those things. I'll also say that nobody can do it alone. Right, and so to your point, you definitely want to have your team of folks that will tell you about yourself and bring you back to reality. And you also want to be able to have people that you can rely on in different settings to help you, right? You need help at home, help at work, and the more that you're growing and scaling, the more help that you need. That is why it's called a company, right? Because when you're building a company, you need the company of others, and you need folks that can help propel you up. And you know that you're a good leader when when your job is to delegate and train. And so, you definitely need to learn how to manage and build a team, and you definitely need to know time management. And then lastly, for leaders, there will never be a time that to-do list goes out. And so just knowing that, to your point, when the day is done, whatever that time slot is, the day is done, and you can pick up that to-do list, God willing, tomorrow, and that is okay. And rest. Rest. That is the new revolution. We talk about like this whole grind culture. That is burnout. That is not sustainable.
And God rested.
And God
And
rested
he
on the
didn't
seventh
need to
day.
rest, but he rested.
And the ultimate.
Yep.
So, and for whatever reason, America will have us thinking we have to grind every single moment of the day, and that is not sustainable.
Right.
Rest, take care of yourself, and then you're like a boomerang. When there's self-care in place, you can pull back to propel forward so much faster. So really making rest the culture needs to be the case.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think having those rhythms are so important. And I think part of rest is understanding that we're not in control. And so when we rest and we let go of that, it's like God is in control. And it just kind of restores our perspective. We only have 6 more minutes left, you guys, of this panel. And so this final question I would love each of you to answer is, what would be one piece of advice that you would have for aspiring women on how to stay rooted in who they are and in their faith while making an impact, while being bold, while leading in whatever that is that God is calling you to do?
I would say my one piece of advice would be and some of it gets back to what we just talked about around this whole work-life balance piece and burnout, is you have to major on the majors. And look, perfection is the enemy of good. That's actually one very critical lesson, that I've learned, which is you can't be good at everything. You got to lean on your community. You got to lean on your tribe. You got to hire great people to help you with this. But at the end of the day, you got to major on the majors. And you're the only person that can figure out what your majors are. And, family, faith, friends, work, in that order, has always been kind of my majors.
That's great. Very wise.
Mine is give yourself room to fail. I went through, in the middle of my book launch, Karen, 3 years ago, I was headed to do a CEO Global Summit in Liberty University, going to an interview in Florida on a TV station, and one of my family members crashed. Somebody I love very closely, that I need, crashed with mental breakdown. And I thought, I don't have time for this, right? I'm supposed to be here and there and there and there. And when I heard God, literally went to God, and I didn't understand why it was happening, he reminded me that it's not about me, and that my DNA of loving and serving people starts with my family. And through that journey, as we started pursuing therapy for the individual and hope, I learned that I had failed, and I had possibly enabled that behavior, because instead of being an empowerer, I was an enabler of that behavior that I tolerated and tolerated and tolerated. And sometimes we love people so much that we try to fix them and enable, and then we fail miserably, and then we beat ourselves up because we failed at it. And for me, I've had a lot of failure. If you read Law School, you're going to read a lot of failure. It's kind of embarrassing, actually. But you know what? It's okay. Learn to fail and let your mess be your triumph. Take your mess and let God work with it, because he can work with mess. Can't work with pride. We know what happens when pride steps in. But learn to fail and move forward.
So beautiful. I would say to the young leaders coming up that if you're worrying, then you're not focused on God. You are trying to take things into your own hands, and it is not conducive to whatever you're building. So if whenever you start to get worrisome or frustrated, you know that you're not in the orbit of God, of your faith. You're trying to take it on in the mortal, in the flesh. And God is trying to tell you that you're going to continue to beat your head up against that thing until you surrender to him. So it's not until you let it go and refocus, recenter back on God that things shift. And when you do let go, things start to expand, and whatever was supposed to happen will. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it'll always be a win. But for me, failure is about learning lessons for your next opportunity, for your next thing. So never, ever worry. It's always going to work out in your favor. Things do not happen to you. They happen for you. And that includes the failures.
One of my mentors said to me, if you strive really hard to elevate yourself, then you'll have to fight like crazy tooth and nail every day to keep yourself up there. Keep people liking you, giving you accolades, applauding you, et cetera, et cetera. But if God elevates you, it should actually be effortless. You shouldn't have to fight at all. You're just there, but it's not about you. And that is actually takes a lot of burden off for women who are trying to do it all. And for me, it's like daily bread. I'm pretty well known to do bored Zoom calls in my bathrobe with no makeup on while I'm cooking breakfast for my son. And that's okay. Who says that I have to put on makeup and look hot for you when we're just doing a board call? No men put on makeup for me, right? Like, no one's putting on nice clothes for me. And that's okay, because it's not about your perception of me superficially. And that frees me to just save time and also be joyful about however people perceive me, because the identity part is not pegged on people's approval, but definitely daily bread. It's amazing how people look online, on Instagram, LinkedIn, and they send me a message, "You're killing it." And the reality is completely the opposite. I was in bed, norovirus, projectile vomited, all of that, but people don't see that. It's true, and it's interesting how there's such a disconnect. But when you don't have to project, when God makes it effortless for you, life is a lot easier, and we might still burn out, but it will probably the burden will be lightened a lot.
Just to summarize, because there was so much wisdom in this, major in the majors, learn to fail. It's okay. Like it's not the end of the road. Surrender and allow God to elevate you. You don't have to elevate yourself. Those are good words, and I think all of that is like our motivation is in a place where we are trying to live in a way where we are glorifying God and we are doing it for the good for Him and for other people. And that's when I think God is going to really use us. And I just thank you all for your examples and how you have lived that out in your lives. And it's such a great note to kind of end this International Women's Day. So thank you all for joining us.